We were hunters and foragers. The frontier was everywhere. We were bounded only by the earth and the ocean and the sky. The open road still softly calls, like a nearly forgotten song of childhood. Despite our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. How far will our nomadic species have wandered by the end of the next century and the next millennium? Who will we become in the far future?
Sejam bem-vindos à primeira sessão do Mês da Ciência e Educação, uma iniciativa da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, comissariada pelo professor Carlos Filhais e pelo David Marçal. Acabámos de ver o trailer da terceira temporada da série Cosmos, com o subtítulo Mundos, possíveis. A nossa convidada de hoje é Druyan, que é viúva de Carl Sagan, é a criadora, a produtora, a autora desta terceira série Cosmos, com o subtítulo Mundos, possíveis. Druyan, I'm glad to have you here in this session. It's a privilege for us. We've been looking at the trailer of Cosmos, Possible Worlds. And let me just start by asking you, it's impossible in a book or even in a serious TV series to talk about all the possibilities from the new worlds. How did you choose the ones which should be present in this book and in the series?
What a great question. And let me first say that the pleasure of being with you is mine. I am so glad to be back in Portugal, even if it's only in the most socially distant way. How I chose the possible worlds was because they had to work on many different levels. It couldn't just be the discovery of the exoplanets, those worlds that circle other suns that we have been discovering by the thousands in recent history. It had to work into the theme of the entire season. And the theme of this season is a science-based optimism about the future that we can still have if we begin to use our science and high technology with wisdom and with foresight. And so the title works on many levels. It's the possible worlds of these exoplanets and the possible worlds even within our own solar system, but also the lost worlds of our ancestors. And most meaningfully for me is the possible world that this Earth can become if we act immediately, urgently, guided by science and by a humane respect for the diversity of life on this beautiful planet.
So, despite everything we see nowadays, this pandemic, the way some people don't trust or mistrust science, you still are optimist?
Yes, I understand the mistrust of science because we live in a very fearful time when there are many dangers. And some of us, when there's danger, take refuge in denial, in self-deception, in fantasy, in the flight from reality. But what is science? But only our most efficient error-correcting mechanism for getting at reality. And so when you see a leader say things that are nonsense and disregard what the scientific community has arrived at consensus about, it's because some of us choose fantasy over reality. But that's okay when there's world enough and time, but not in a situation where nature is reacting predictably to our excesses. Nature will not be deceived. We can't lie our way out of this. And if we're not going to resort to lying, then we have to use science as the way to repair and to preserve this magnificent planet. And, the scientists got everything right. Going back 70, 80 years, the scientists have been predicting what will happen to us if we keep sending huge amounts of greenhouse gases, methane and carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere at rates unprecedented in human history. They got it all right. They made prophecies that rival anything that anyone in the history of our species ever made. They said that there would be massive wildfires, which I know you have experienced. They said that there would be hurricanes of a much higher ferocity. They said that there would be droughts. They said that the poles would begin to melt. They said that the oceans would heat. They got everything right.
Why don't politicians, decision makers, and even the public, why don't they follow those rules and those instructions from the scientists? I mean,
why don't they do the right thing? Why don't they understand science?
The right thing. Well, some of them do the right thing. There are those who absolutely are doing and have been doing the right thing for a long time. But unfortunately, there are others who, in my view, represent a minority of the public who would rather keep things as they are, in fact, make them worse. And that's what we're up against. But I take a tremendous amount of encouragement from the grassroots reaction worldwide to this insanity. And that's why I do Cosmos, and that's why I give talks. Because in Cosmos, we can tell stories, such as the story of Nikolai Vavilov, the botanist, who was willing to give up his life to stand up because it matters what's true. He was willing to die so that you and I, in the future, to him, the far future, could flourish. And that's why we tell his story, because we want to honor him, because he hasn't been given his due, but also because we want to touch that part of you that is still alive and alert and ready to awaken. So yes, there are scoundrels who would lie and who would pretend that the danger doesn't exist. But the rest of us have to coalesce behind those who understand the danger and are willing to work to fix it.
So we can see that to communicate science is a passion. You are passionate by this job, I mean. So it's not just because you once did help Carl Sagan to do the first series, then you didn't feel obliged to do the same. No, it's a passion. Today still you are passionate by this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I had various passions before I met Carl that dovetailed beautifully, that beautifully fit with his passions. But when I was with Carl, I learned that what was possible, how a human being could be so fully alive and so completely able to realize all of his gifts in such a way that he became stronger, more graceful, more patient. And he is my inspiration. I do this because it's my passion. Mm-hmm. But what I learned with him has been the rocket fuel for me.
Yes, but you are aware that's not only your passion, that's a passion of many other people inspired by Carl Sagan and by you.
Yes.
And by you.
Yes.
So I can talk a little bit about my personal experience. 40 years ago, it had a very great impact on me reading Cosmo and seeing the TV series. I have here the Portuguese edition, and this is a treasure I have in my bookshelf. And this is dedicated to you, and you wrote the preface to the Portuguese edition. And I have, together with these, all your books, Comet, The Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, Cosmic Connections, Billions and Billions. And this is a very timely book, The World Infested with Demons.
Yes.
In this book, Carl was saying that he was previewing the future. He was saying that ignorance, there is a famous sentence here, ignorance is and power, this is a strong and explosion could come out of that. So he was a kind of a previewer, not a prophet, because you cannot. But what can you say about that? The future was already in that book, this future we are living now?
Well, we could see what was coming because there was a turning away, at least in the United States. There was a kind of turning away from reality. And this didn't begin just 4 years ago. This began a long time ago. There was an abandonment of certain values. And there were moments when things were a little better, and then there were moments when they got worse, but never as bad as they are today. Today is, for me, in my experience, in my opinion, a low point in American history. And I fear for the institutions and the values that have kept us strong. Obviously, the history of the United States is sullied, is dirtied by many wrongs. But there was that embracing of people from all over the world with respect. Yes, the governments did terrible things, crimes, but there was a kind of cultural respect for people from everywhere, and the knowledge, when I was growing up at least, that the strength of the country was in its respect and welcoming of people. You know, the reason we had that great moment of power was because we had welcomed people from everywhere and appreciated them. And our current president has shamed us. He shames us every day. Mm-hmm. He shames values. And, you know, how did Carl Sagan come to be? He was a working class child. His parents lived from paycheck to paycheck. He went to the public schools of Brooklyn, New York. And yet, the skies were not the limit for him. He dreams as an 11-year-old child of the unfolding, of the exploration of the cosmos, and makes a little drawing, which is now in our Library of Congress. And he fulfilled those dreams. He was one of the central participants on our first interstellar mission, NASA's Voyager mission. He got to fulfill his dreams. And now, I don't want to go too far away from cosmos and the things that we're supposed to talk about. But I think he would be heartbroken if he saw where we were at this moment.
What would he say now? What would he be saying now? The same as you are saying.
Well, I know I'll never see him again because I don't believe in an afterlife. But I can't help it. I do have these fantasies of telling him, like, you won't believe what happened. There's so many things that, I would love to tell him about that are, about our children and grandchildren, these wonderful things.
Yes.
But when I imagine telling Carl who the President of the United States is, who was a figure when Carl was alive of ridicule and, kind of the emblematic of stupidity and ignorance and bias and racism and sexism and everything bad.
Yes.
I don't think I would have the heart to tell him because, he really had great dreams for the planet and for our country.
And people.
Sometimes I ask myself, maybe if he had lived and he was alive and well, he could have helped prevent this. Because I think he's more beloved now globally than even when he was alive. And so I just don't think I'd have the heart to tell him. But that's going back to Cosmos, so Cosmos is being shown in 180 countries around the world. And one of the reasons I do have hope is because when we made the first Cosmos in 1979, 80, when we were working on Cosmos, there was a kind of fragmentation of the people of the world. Yes, you could catch the odd radio broadcast from here or there, but it was nothing like today. The fact that we can communicate with each other directly at the speed of light, that we have these phones, that makes it possible for people all over the world to coalesce behind an ideal, behind something important. That gives me hope. Many, many years ago, I was talking to a guy and he said to me, this is like 30 years ago, he said, it's not that there aren't enough good people in the world. It's just that we don't have each other's phone numbers. But now we do. And that's part
We have your phone number.
You have my phone number, definitely, and I've got yours now. So that gives me hope that there are ways I grew up during the nuclear arms race, the worst part of the nuclear arms race. There were some 60,000 nuclear weapons on very short, few minute long fuses. And the whole world, the whole planet was just like a hostage drama rigged by the United States and what was then the Soviet Union. And that seemed like a powder keg that was going to go off at any moment. And my whole childhood and early life was dominated by this idea that something could go horribly wrong and a city would disappear. And what that would do to our civilization, to our self-esteem as human beings. Well, somehow, so far so good, we managed to at least get through that. But right now, I think we're up against something much bigger. And all I can tell you is I really believe a change is going to come in the United States, but I've been wrong before.
Tell me, we have so many books about science, documentaries, talks. People go more to school than they used to go. So what is failing? Is the education system? Are we failing as science communicators? Failing? What is going wrong?
I think we are in an area which is not amenable to logic. I think that the people who, I can only speak in the United States. I think that the people who follow Trump blindly and uncritically, and no matter how many, 200,000 people dead needlessly, 200,000 Americans, which, what they care about, every value trashed, and yet they still love him. Well, to me, that says that it's not amenable to logic. And I have to say that as a child, I could never understand the rise of fascism. I just couldn't understand how it could happen. I couldn't understand how ordinary German people who, should be like everyone else, could go along with an Adolf Hitler. And I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler, but I am saying that we are primates. We carry this evolutionary baggage with us. This adoration of the alpha male. Doesn't matter what he does. It's just that pheromone of power that many of us react to. And I think there's some basis to that, because if you look at the people who support him, there's a tremendous difference between the male and female levels of support. Women are far less likely, although there are some, to get behind this kind of behavior and criminality. And I think there is some, we carry, it's in our genes. And so I think also the people who supported him in the beginning become so invested in his success personally. They fought with their relatives, they fought with their friends and people at work, and they stood up for him. And the more disgraceful his behavior is, the more they have to hold on to it. Because if they give up now, they're going to ride the ship all the way down to the bottom, because they don't have the wherewithal or the self-esteem to step away and look unflinchingly at the cost of supporting him. The story of the Republican Party in this country, I have never been a Republican, but I don't think I ever felt so astonished at the members, let's say Republican members of our government, standing without any sign of shock or dismay behind him as he toys with the idea of disregarding the vote. I mean, if that doesn't give them pause, or the idea of not responding to congressional subpoenas, which happened months ago, as if there wasn't a balance of the tripartite government that has been so important to our success. All of these things. And it's horrifying. And,
So
and
let's hope that America is going to be smart again.
Yes, but you share this view of yours. It could help us to understand how this was possible. This possible world happened. Okay, but
this world is going. There's going to be another world for America and for the planet at large.
Let me ask you now a different thing. You are not a scientist. You are not a scientist, but how do you think researchers and scientists look at you? I mean, how is that relation? Because you must contact them, you must engage them to produce your...
Many. Yes. It's a great question. No one's ever asked me that question before. I'm glad you did. Well, I have been very lucky because I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. And that is just a hunter-gatherer of stories. But I am someone who is something, although not officially, something of a historian of science. I have studied science, and I think, maybe people are just really nice to you and they don't really tell you how they feel. But I've never felt, especially in the last several years, I've never felt anything but a tremendous openness, generosity, willingness to share information. Because, if you go back to when Carl was starting out, there was such contempt for the scientist who dared to connect with the public. It was a priesthood. Only it was a priesthood that never adapted the language of the country as the Roman Catholic Church did in the 60s. Instead, it was a priesthood that stuck to its jargon. And they punished Carl for his efforts at public outreach. And that has changed because I think there was a recognition that, first of all, science is under attack. Science is under siege in the United States. And so there was a feeling that, in a way, those of us who attempt to communicate, to be a bridge between the culture of science and the broader culture, are really necessary for their survival. Because, all of these big science projects, they either depend upon taxpayer money or essentially the kindness, the whims of billionaires. And that's, in my view, a step back into the 19th century, not a step forward. And so the public support of the space program, public support of all of the important scientific and medical projects is necessary. And without a bridge, without someone who wants to tell their stories, and not only that, but offer up heroes, as we do in Cosmos, that they've never heard of before, that no one knows. These are not the Galileos and the Einsteins. These are people who made an enormous contribution to our current understanding of nature. And so to answer your question, I have been treated very kindly by the scientific community. And, so many people have told me it happens virtually every day that they are scientists. They teach science. They study science because something that Carl did or we did together or I've done since has touched their lives. And so if you want to recruit more people who respect the insights and the values of science and more people who want to take a pathway in science, then the only way to do it is to get a platform in popular culture so that people who are underserved scientifically can have a way in.
I ask this question because you use fiction, you use your imagination, and scientists deal with reality, and that could be some reaction from them when you use fiction, and they all only like what is real.
Yes, well, the only fiction we use are our lavish visual effects.
Yeah.
And even those, there's always a scientist sitting in my screening room.
Okay.
When I'm at a shot, and we go, Brandon Braga, my collaborator, and we go through some 60 iterations of every shot before we final it. And so there's always someone who is knowledgeable in the room to say, I'll say, is the physics right? Is the chemistry right? Does it look right? And so, yeah, we would never, play with those things because it's so critical that, the original series, people are still watching it 40 years later because we went to such lengths to get things right.
Yeah, but more than that, imagination is also a resource of the scientists. They have to imagine worlds. So Einstein said that. Einstein said that imagination is better than knowledge because imagination brings knowledge. With imagination, you can go everywhere.
Exactly. That's so right. And he also said, I don't mean to cut you off. Did I interrupt you?
No, please, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Einstein, in my new book, I talk about how Albert Einstein was asked to open the 1939 New York World's Fair. And it's a great story. And with a tremendous fanfare. And what he said was that if science is ever to fully fulfill its mission the way that art has, its inner meaning must penetrate deeply into the consciousness of the public. So when I saw that, which was in the beginning of this project, this third season in the new book, that was my mantra because I felt he was talking to me, and he was saying that what I was doing and what I have been doing all my life is part of the mission of science. And I couldn't agree more, because how can you have a society that aspires to be a democracy when it's totally dependent on science and high technology, and yet so few of us understand the insights, the working, the values of either? And so I couldn't agree more. And, you pick Einstein is a great hero of mine who appears
so your book
in various
starts with
places.
the World Fair. Your book starts, as you said, with the World Fair, with the young Carl. He was 5 years old, I think. Okay, and at the end of the prologue, there is here a sentence which struck me very much. And I'm going to read these 3 or 4 lines. It's about the relationship between science and love. Science, like love, is a means to that transcendence, to that soaring experience of the honest of being fully alive. The scientific approach to nature and my understanding of love are the same. Can you elaborate a little more on that? So the deep relationship between our human feelings and the endeavor of discovering.
I love it. This is, I believe this very strongly. So what is love? You fall in love with someone. Do you fall in love with your projection of who they could be or might be or who you want them to be? No, that deep, lasting love is to look at the other unflinchingly, clearly, to see them exactly as they are and to love them as they are. So I was thinking about, why is science spiritually so important to me? And I realized it was because there is no clearer way of looking at nature. Think of how much of nature would be totally foreclosed to us without science. the realms of cells, of atoms, of galaxies, of stars, of planets, of ourselves. We couldn't see those things, but we developed a method for constantly going deeper, to find more, to understand, to see more clearly. That is a kind of love of nature.
So to go deeper, as you write, to go deeper, to reach higher.
And but also to see clearly and to love nature as it is, not to be confused by our delusions, our projections, our centrality to it. Only science could wean us of our delusion that we are the center of the universe. Think of Copernicus. Think of everything that's happened since, the pale blue dot. Think of how only science could make us see our true circumstances. That is what love does. Love, I believe, brings you closer to truth. And it's a sacred undertaking. It's something so precious and magnificent. And to me, the only thing that we do in our lives that's like that is science.
So about love, maybe I ask you, I heard, maybe you may confirm or not, there's going to be a project about your love story with Carl. So there are some people interested in making a movie. Is that true?
There is some truth to that. But I guess I'm not in a position right now to speak about it, but I have some excitement.
Okay.
That it will.
I think it will be a great project if
all I know is that everybody involved will give it everything they have.
Yeah.
But you will engage with this idea, of course. You will accept.
Yes, I don't want to go into anything at this point.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay. We know that some years ago, when we were younger, perhaps a teacher at basic school or even at high school influenced our careers.
Yes.
You also know that Carl influenced many careers. For instance, Professor Carlos was influenced by him. But you have something happened when you were at high school. I read this somewhere. And you asked about P. This relation? Can you tell us share
personal
that
experience
story
in school and?
Yes. Well, this is a story
but...
about. Yes. No. This I like to talk about because it shows you how important and influential any teacher can be in someone's life. When I was in junior high school, I was sitting in my math class. And my teacher was giving us the ratio of the radius of a circle to the circumference, pi or p. And she said, it's 3.14, blah, 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 blah. And I began to have this physical reaction. And I raised my hand, and it was like a religious experience, I have to say. Goosebumps all over. I raised my hand. And I said, are you saying that this is true for every circle in the whole universe? And she got very red, very angry. And she said, don't ask stupid questions. And I burst into tears. I was so, it was like you were going really fast and really excited. And then you'd been punched in the nose. And I burst into tears. And I ran out of my classroom. And that was the end, really, of my interest in mathematics and my willingness to really listen in science class. This was in junior high school.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you could take the conclusion that there are no stupid questions. We must question every day, everything, right?
That was my reward.
Yes.
That I harbored this wound, this humiliation, until I met Carl. And as we worked together and got to know each other, it ended up that I had a private tutorial.
Yes.
From one of the greatest teachers the world has ever known, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I could ask him anything, and he most often really knew the answer and gave me the most exquisite explanation. But if he didn't, we would chase down that answer, and we did that for our children too. And my daughter, in her new book, she talks about how this was kind of the religious nature of our home, was that if you asked a question and the parents didn't know the answer, you no matter what was happening, you began on a quest until you found the answer. And so I was very lucky. Few people who've been hurt this way, wounded this way, ever get such a wonderful compensation later in life.
Some years ago also, let me now talk, I would like to hear from you about the relation between science and religion, because I know you were a speaker at Beyond Belief, Science, Religion, Reason and Survival. Most scientists are agnostic or even atheist. But shouldn't they be open to so many new possible worlds and even the possibility of the existence of a supernatural being?
Yes, I have so many thoughts. What a rich question. I could give a whole talk on this.
Please.
One thing is that if I could change something about the way we talk, I would change the word supernatural to subnatural. Because nature there's nothing above nature. The lies we make up, the fantasies we have, that's not above nature. That's below nature. So this is what I think. I was very lucky because I came from a very close-knit, loving family. And my grandparents were very devout, and my parents were not. And yet my father's relationship to his parents was beautiful. He loved them. They had never been educated except to read. He had an advanced degree from university, and yet he loved his parents. I never even saw my father give his parents a dirty look or an angry word. And so one day I asked him, Dad, how is this possible? You seem to worship your parents. They are so devout and so religious that it really dominates their life. That's their first concern, is to carry out what they believe God is asking of them. And you are a materialist, an atheist, an agnostic. You don't do any of those things. And yet there's no tension, no anger. And he told me the story, which has been so critical to my whole life. He said that he came home from university and he found his father praying. He was davening. He was wrapped in a prayer shawl, and he was in ecstasy in the kitchen praying very solemnly. And my father, 20 years old, waiting, standing there, shaking in his boots. And finally, my grandfather opened his eyes and saw my father standing there as if my father was the answer to his prayers. And he stood up to embrace my father. And my father said, "No, Pop, no. I've got something to tell you, Pop. I am not going to go to the synagogue. I am not going to pray. I am not going to be kosher. I am not going to do any of those things. I'm going to ride on the Sabbath because it's all fake. It's all a bunch of lies. It's not real. And I said, what did Grandpa say? And my father said, he looked at me, put his arms around me, and he said, the only sin would be to pretend.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather really believed in God, not as a means of controlling other people or intimidating them or punishing them, but he really believed. So I have profound respect for people who are like that. I understand. And I don't think I know more than they know. The universe, we don't understand. Apart from the outlines of what happened in the first few moments after the Big Bang, we don't understand where the universe came from, how it came to be. We have explored the teeniest, tiniest part of it. And one of the great things about science, its humility, is to know what it does not know. Mm-hmm. So I will never be arrogant about people who have conventional religious beliefs because I don't know anything about how the universe really came to be, and I don't know anything about God. What I do know is the little that we do know is precious, and we must be free to keep searching. Mm-hmm. No one should stop this sacred searching that science does. But at the same time, no arrogance towards those who believe or those who don't. Just the sense of what is best for you. For me, my spiritual high comes from the relatedness of all life on earth.
So you talk about spirituality. So there is something sacred in science. Can you use the word sacred or when you are speaking about the cosmos?
Yes, the sacred part is that the searching never ends. There is no absolute truth where science it's an endless road. And it's the endlessness of the road. It's giving the highest rewards to those who prove science wrong. That's the genius of it. That's what's sacred about it. Not any one particular level of understanding. That's not sacred. If it were, then how could classical physics give way and accept quantum physics, which is so baffling? Because that searching is ongoing. And that's the thing I love the most about it. Because, to think you have all the answers to all the questions is a delusion. And it doesn't matter if you're scientific or you're religious. Either way, it's a mistake. It's an error, a failure of imagination. And so...
Right. Okay. We have so many things to talk about. I would like to go back to the book. You have several stories. So telling a story is the best way, perhaps, to communicate, to reach people. What is the line you follow? You find something that could be interesting, and then you try to build a story about it. How is this workflow? I mean,
yes. Well, you're absolutely right. As I said earlier, we're a story-driven species, and I know personally, especially as a non-scientist, that my way into an idea is very often the narrative. And not only that, but there are stories, not all of them, all the ones that get into Cosmos in the show or the book have to be stories that work on so many different levels. It has to be, it has to have drama. It has to have mystery. It has to be compelling, struggle. These are the things that human beings relate to and that I relate to. So I understand that if we're in a realm or in a subject that is just a kind of single level exposition of a particular idea, that's often not enough. Sometimes you need the person who discovered, who stumbled on the idea, the person, there's the person who got into a lot of trouble because they were searching for the answer, or they found an answer that no one else had found before. And so, some of the stories I love best in this book are, for instance, the story of Yuri Kondratyuk and his letter to the future, to 50 years away. He's a soldier in a trench in World War I, and he understands how you could mount a practical expedition to the moon and return. And he writes this book and he self-publishes it. Nobody cares. And he has an awful life filled with persecution. But the manuscript survives. And so when the Apollo engineers are trying to figure out how to send an enormous rocket to the moon, land it on the moon, lift off from the moon, land it back on Earth, and they can't get anywhere, two scientists present this tattered manuscript. The opening words are, "To you who are mounting the first mission to the moon, be not afraid. There is no theoretical obstacle to accomplishing this." Now, this is also the person who gave us the most critical foundation for the exploration by robotic spacecraft of the solar system and beyond, the gravitational assist. He's the first one to realize that we could swing from world to world as our ancestors once did, from tree to tree. He understood, and of course, this, Voyager would not have been possible without utilizing the mass of Jupiter. So to swing around Jupiter and be propelled ultimately out of the solar system. This is all owed to this man who never got what he deserved in his life. And the fact that, at the time, NASA really didn't tell this story because it was during the Cold War. They didn't want to say, well, this guy from the Ukraine actually figured this out. But Neil Armstrong, the great Neil Armstrong, upon his return from the moon, made a pilgrimage to this little hovel, this little cottage where Kondratyuk had been born. And I am so touched by that story. There are at least a dozen such stories, which not only make it possible for you to explain celestial mechanics and all of these different things, but also to feel something about what an achievement this is and how everything we do is on the shoulders of our ancestors.
It's very interesting in the book because you talk about unknown people. Normally, the people, they don't know Vavilov, they don't know Thomas Young, they don't know. And
Thomas Young, yes.
Yes. And this is really interesting. So these are stories which must be known. And you made these stories known to the people. So there are great stories which are not yet known. So we are coming to the end.
Yes. I'd like to know. We would like to know what other projects are on your desk. I mean, what are you thinking about? What are you preparing?
Final questions.
I have some very exciting projects on my desk. They're not ready to be announced yet, but I hope to be able to tell you about them in the not too distant future. I have a lot of work to do, and I want to keep fighting for science and for the democratic values that make science possible. Openness, free expression of ideas, no arguments from authority. These are the things that are the lifeblood of science and democracy. They're indivisible. And so that's my hope, to do these projects and keep standing up for what I believe in.
Do you think possible to have a sequel, so another show at Cosmos?
Yes,
A fourth session?
I have a
Because I hope to live, and it's like the Star Wars. It's more than 40 years.
Yeah, no, I have another Cosmos in me, and this idea is percolating in my soul and my brain, and I'm very lucky to be working with Brandon Braga and Sam Sagan, my son,
Yes.
on developing it, and we'll see what happens. You know, it takes a couple of years to do a Cosmos.
Yes,
because
yes,
of
yes.
the very lavish visual effects and and the research and all of it. But I can't wait to do the next one.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It was really a pleasure and a privilege to have you on this in this session and sharing all your thoughts with us, all your reflections from New York. And we are here in Lisbon, and technology allows us to do this. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It was great being with
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity, for the questions, and please give my love to Lisbon. I hope to return. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. E assim termina esta primeira sessão do programa Ciência, do mês Ciência e Educação da Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos. E posso já dizer que daqui a uma semana haverá a próxima sessão, que tem por tema preparação para pandemias. Vem tudo a propósito, claro. Os convidados, ou a convidada principal será Nahid Badeliga, que é epidemiologista da Universidade de Boston, e aqui em estúdio estarei eu com o professor Filipe Frois, que é o coordenador do Gabinete de Crise da Ordem dos Médicos para esta questão da pandemia. Muito obrigado por estar connosco e até para a semana.